Welcome to the Home Studio Hangout podcast, where we explore what it's like building, running, and working out of a home studio with your hosts, Joshua Matotek, Andrew Simmons, and many guests in different areas of the music industry.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Home Studio Hangout podcast. My name is Drew. This episode is me and my good friend Ian Joshua O'Reilly. We had a long conversation and I decided to split it up into two episodes. The second part is his foray into deciding to stop doing production and lead into producing his own band full time and focusing on producing just his band and getting a band called Love to the heights that he believed it can be. And then we discussed some other bands and music related things and production related things as well. So regardless of when you're watching this, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Ian Joshua O'Reilly, Mr. IJR himself. I was going to say, that's a very good segue into like, now we're kind of up to date. So you stopped producing full time. And part there was a couple
line there.
Yeah, there was a couple reasons for that.
The pandemic being one, which I didn't know was going to happen.
Being a huge one, and then kind of following that up with deciding to have a little girl.
Yeah, and getting married, like literally all of that.
Getting married, literally in the middle of the pandemic.
I can draw the through line really quickly for all that because, like, so 2019, I didn't know the pandemic was coming. None of us do. Or none of us did, but it was funny. In like August, I had been still producing for most of early 2019. We had just done the first big gig, and I could tell that like I was getting burnt out on working with bands, and I love bands and I love working with them. But I was like I said, I still to this day have had the privilege. I've never had to work on a project I didn't want to work on. I wanted it to stay that way. So I got a part-time job working for Warby Parker, where I got my glasses from. Shout out Warby Parker, the greatest company in the world. Not sponsored. I had fun working there and kind of producing, and I was still driving for Lyft and Uber whenever I needed the money, because during the whole of 2018, by the time I was like really in the thick of producing, I had no other work. I didn't even have to drive for Lyft and Uber. I was working all the time at the studio. Yeah, or I was on tour, and I remember thinking to myself, Kelsey and I just proposed to Kelsey, my wife and my best friend for over half my life since I was 13. And I just proposed to her in December 2018. So she was fully behind my dream of doing music full time. She still is the most supportive person in the world. So it wasn't like I got engaged and now, I need to get a real job. It was more like I personally was trying to figure out what I was going to do. So I got a job working for our friend who was an insurance agent who was renting us a practice space that we had where we ended up recording some cool stuff at. But like, it was basically just like this little like converted shed with AC like on the property of this little building. And I was basically just doing all her social media and back end stuff.
And it was nearby the studio you were working out of at the time.
Yeah, it was right by Toast and Jam. Yeah, so it made sense. It
made a ton of sense. And she let you you had a lot of flexibility with her, and she was a fan of what you were doing in the scene.
Yeah, she came to Big Gig. She and her husband came to Big Gig.
Awesome.
And she was awesome. And I was super into the way things were happening rhythm wise in my life, because like at the time Kelsey and I were moving out of our apartment in Swanee into a loft that my boss was letting us live in a city north of here called Jefferson, and it was like this big loft that I kind of turned into a studio, and like literally like she let us live there for like next to nothing, and it was just super cool. And I was really into the rhythm and the way things were going, because I was like, I had a super chill work from home job where I could like, Kelsey and I were planning on getting married in March 2020, like our wedding plans. But like, all this stuff was happening. And I was like, I really want to go into my married life feeling a little more stable, not just financially, but like mentally. Like I was like, I know what I love to do, but it's not just being in a studio back to back working with bands. Like I like doing that on a more case by case basis. So I wanted to do that. So I started having bands come and record stuff at my loft whenever they could, and we would track drums in there, and it was really cool. And I set up a studio. It's the one you posted the picture of last night and on Twitter. And man, I missed that loft, but it was just really cool because I was able to work on things in the capacity I wanted to because I was always working from home. And I felt very aware of like what I was starting to realize I enjoyed. And then the pandemic happened. Our wedding plans got put on hold. So Kelsey and I got married just legally in August of 2020 later that year. And then we had been planning on having a kid anyway, like whether we had our wedding or not. We were like, after we get married, like within the next year, before we're 30, before we're 29, we want to have our first kid.
Yeah.
So around late 2020, one of the last records I worked on like with a band in that span of time, and this was at Toast and Jam 2 with Don Maduri, was me and my friend, our mutual friend Corey Batista, who I work on so many records with. He's mixed a ton of the records I work on. He works with us on the new stuff. We worked on the Celebrity Therapist record by the Callous Cowboys with him and Dom. And Ryan worked on that too. He was an incredible vocal producer on that record. And so it was like this dream team of like all of us working together. And I remember one of the nice things about it was because the vast majority of the engineering was Corey, I really got to just focus on being creative with Carson and with Ryan.
Yeah.
And that like, and Carson had been showing me the demos for that record since the week after their first album came out, right after our first album came out in Harm in 2019. And I would remember being a part of that record, even though it wasn't like a full, like quote unquote, like IJR production record, the capacity in which I got to work on those songs ended up being, I was like, this is what I want to do. Is like these textures, the sounds, the identity, the words. Like, and again, so much of that is Carson. I can't take credit for all of that, but like, I remember one of the singles they dropped was it had a lyric that I'd written, and Carson texted me the day it came out and said, "Thank you for writing the best lyric on the album." And I was like, I didn't even mean to, you know, it was from a conversation we'd had. And it was like it was the "Pray for This World" lyric, whatever we get, we deserve, you know, like, and and I was like, man, like that's what I really want. Like that's what gives me all the good feelings. And what was cool is around the time when I'd gotten the job right before the pandemic, like within that year before that, Ryan Love came back into my life, and he was a friend of mine who I'd been friends with him for over a decade. We did a lot of early music stuff together. He was from that same, we're like the exact same age, we're a month apart. He was from that same generation of bands that we came from. But he very much like he was a drummer in a post-rock band that sounded like Explosions in the Sky when we were playing shows together in our early 20s. But he was like the principal composer. He would write these devastating, like beautiful melodies. He just had such a penchant for this. And then on top of that, he had this acoustic side project that our friend Tim, the first producer I interned for, literally Ryan was there from the beginning. It's crazy. He had this acoustic record that was like a concept record that he wrote called Distances, which was like this beautiful like concept record about a family that fell apart and everything. And I heard Ryan's voice the first time, I think in like 2013, like his singing voice, outside of him playing drums in a band and composing guitar for like this ambient, like heavy music. And I was like, oh my God, like he's a songwriter. And he's not just a songwriter. He writes some of the most beautiful and like devastating melodies like I've ever heard. And I had been the frontman of the band and the singer and guitar player of the band I was in at the time when we were playing shows with them. We were called Inveritus, and like I was just kind of like, it was like by the end of it, it was like heavy kind of thricey kind of stuff. You know what I mean? I remember thinking to myself, man, if I could just start a band with Ryan Love, he could sing my songs. Like he could sing my lyrics and they would sound so much better. And I could play guitar and he played it. And so we actually conspired, apart from our bands at the time in like 2014, to start a band, which funny enough, we called Thriving Season back then. That was where that name really came from. I don't know if you knew that. We never fully formed it, but then we tried to start another band after my band broke up with the remnants of that band that we were calling Migrant. We recorded one single and we never released it, but like the guitar player from his band, Lorraine, our friend Josh, joined, and so it was like 5 dudes and he was singing, and we kind of had this like Anne Boleyn kind of almost like Seosin kind of thing going on. And I remember thinking, oh, we're gonna be like the biggest rock band in the world because we have him. You know what I mean? Like we were so
I will say he does have that. He does have that star power about him, as quality, humble as he is. Yeah, he would hate me.
Yeah,
for
he would
saying
never
this.
own it. He would never own it. But
any of this.
Genuinely, he's not
Yeah.
false humble. Like his humility is extremely authentic, and even more so now than back then. But he around the time I was giving up being in a band after Kevin passed away, he was also kind of giving up music too because he was in this relationship with this girl who he wrote about when our first single Colors Bloom. Who kind of just convinced him that he shouldn't be a musician, or at least like outside of being a hobby, which he like reluctantly agreed with at the time. And I remember he called me after Kevin died to like express his condolences and whatnot. And the conversation we had was literally, he was like, so what is 10th Row gonna do? And I was like, I don't know, dude, we're gonna play like these last couple shows. I think we're just gonna do like a big benefit, like final show at the Masquerade for Kevin's family. Then we're just gonna break up. I don't think I have it in me to do a band again. And he was like, dude, he's like, you better do music again. He's like, it's gonna be a sad world if Ian Joshua O'Reilly's not making music. And I was like, well, if you're not making music, it's a sad world. Like you're literally, and this was in 2016. I was like, you're literally one of my favorite songwriters of all time, and you're my friend. And he's like, dude, I don't know. I was like, dude, you need to at least do some kind of project. He's like, maybe, dude. He's like, I don't know. He literally said, I think my music days are behind me, man. I just don't think, because his band had signed, his post-rock band Lorraine had signed to a label in China who put out like Hammock Records, and and then the band fell apart before their record could come out. So they had all these albums like pressed and ready to go, and then the band broke up. And he was just so not about it. And I was like, well, do me two favors. I was like, quit smoking cigarettes, which I eventually made him do later because I said I would not start a band called Love with him unless he did, because then I would know he was taking it seriously. I was like, quit smoking cigarettes, and if the day ever comes that Ryan Love wants to do music seriously again, or even casually, call me, because I will drop everything I'm doing to do music with Ryan Love. And he was like, okay, word, I will. And sure enough, like 3 years later, he called me like completely out of the blue, and we caught up, and he brought me these songs, and one was Colors Bloom, the other one was Another Life, which we brought to you in Greenville after he and I like fleshed it out at my apartment. And that was the basis for what became a band called Love, which is our, the current band that I'm in. And it's like my big, like, it's like my passion project. Like, this is my actual like band, this is my baby with Ryan. And you were there from the genesis of it, which I think is really cool, because you've been able to play live with us, but also like even before that, you were like essentially like the third member producing with us, because it's like, it's me and him, and then all the other guys like Blake, Austin, and Brooks as live members. Exactly,
as live members, but kind of behind the scenes, collaborators.
They're more involved now, because originally, like, we had, our first show, we had Sam from the Callous Cowboys play drums for us. We had Julian from Stay Here play guitar, and we've had countless people. Bina from Clavicle played keys for us for a couple shows. But the thing that I think is super interesting is that, like, all of the things that you asked me to kind of give a preface for, like, to lead into this, really, I realized at the beginning of a band called Love, I think I understood this, but really shaped not just the band itself or my ability to be in the band, but like what I thought about in terms of like how I approached production and recording and songwriting. Like, everything I loved about music, the most refined aspects of it were built by all of those things with all of these other artists in this community in Atlanta and the surrounding things. Like, it's literally, it's insane to me. I've talked to Ryan about this before, but it's funny how this band is not only the sum of its parts, but it's literally the sum of everything that's come before it. Like, it's kind of
your entire experience in the music of Atlanta, music scene,
and Ryan's as well too. That's the crazy thing.
Ryan's as well, because it's all like folding in on itself.
When we started the band, we were both like really reconnecting as friends and bonding over our very genuine mutual love of Coldplay and the 1975. And I introduced him to Radiohead and Enter Shikari, and I was like, if you like all of this, you need to really dig into these artists. And we just saw Ed Sheeran, which was like, when he first brought the songs to me, it wasn't even going to be a band. He brought Colors Bloom and Another Life to me, and one of the first things he said was, he was like, he's like, I want to do the music thing for real. He's like, me and her broke up, and I want to give this a shot. And he's like, I've heard all the stuff you've been producing at Toast and Jam. I've heard the Stay Here stuff. It's amazing. He's like, I'm not comfortable working with any other producer that's not you, because I feel like you're going to be the guy who can help me realize it. And I was like, dude, absolutely. And so he wanted me to like play, since he's a drummer, he wanted to play drums on whatever the songs needed drums. and wanted me to play a guitar and bass and whatever programming keys or like anything else I could do. And then basically be like his Phineas to his Billie Eilish. You know what I mean? Like he wanted me to be like the producer and like the key live member apart from anyone who might play drums. And which is funny because that's kind of more what the role you took after the fact once I became part of the band, like for real. So the thing that was crazy is that early on we didn't get together in that wave of pop trying to make like a hit. We weren't, even though all that stuff was happening at that time, like Troye Sivan and like Lauv, we weren't trying to make stuff like that, or we weren't even trying to, like, we were bonding over our love of like the 1975, especially, who we still love, but we weren't trying to do that pop thing that a lot of Nashville and LA pop type producers try to do with bands, where they're like, you have to, you know, like if you guys want to succeed, you need your Olivia Rodrigo type song, and you need your version of Chocolate from 2013, even though that's my daughter, by the way, you're hearing it. But so for any viewers who are hearing this for the first time, my wife and daughter just entered the room. They're awesome. But but basically we ended up making this thing where it was like, or kind of like a pact almost, where we're like, we knew that with the very sultry, kind of smoky, soulful nature of Ryan's voice, we knew this thing was going to be labeled as pop by anyone who heard it, no matter how heavy the songs got or what it was. Just by nature of what we were doing, it was going to be, it was going to kind of fall in that very wide umbrella of pop, which was fine with us because that's where we were. Some people in the scene have called us like, you know, emo Tears for Fears, or like Coldplay for emo kids. So people like register the pop element, but they'll still like put us adjacent to like alternative stuff, which I think is cool. But we've never really put a label.
I think it's also just, once again, pulling from your experiences, from your background, also his, but also his voice doesn't necessarily lend it to what you would see as typically pop.
Right. That's the nice thing, especially right now. Like, he's closer to like, I've said this a million times. He's closer to like, you know, like Caleb Followill from like Kings of Leon, who they don't even sound alike, but he's closer to that than he is that kind of like smooth pop male vocal. That's the cool thing right now, you know, or that's been the cool thing for the last several years in music.
The higher vocal.
Right, exactly. And it's like, so we bonded over all that stuff, but the thing that we bonded over about the artists wasn't just, oh, we need to rip off that riff or that lick, or we need to have like a dancey thing, or we need to have a sad boy song. We just kind of were like, all of these artists really followed their own muse and kind of made exactly what they wanted to make at the time that they did. And that either caught a wave or created a wave. And we were so sold on that because not only did they stick to their own muse, but all of our favorite artists that really inspired a band called Love and everything leading up to it was essentially homemade, like self-produced. You know, like the 1975 did their first couple records with Mike Crossy, but they were credited as producers, but then they produced the rest of their stuff. But even those first 4 EPs, that was just them making stuff like in their room, basically. You know, Coldplay was working with an engineer, but, you know, they produced the record. They had Phil Harvey, who's their best bud, being kind of like the creative director for their band. Everything I love has always been not a label with a suit telling like a young budding pop artist. And I know plenty of people, you and I both know plenty of people who do that for work. I'm not shitting on that at all.
There's a place for it.
There is a place for it. But it's like, my favorite stuff for me typically has never fallen into that world of like this particular hit at this time, kind of, so we can have playlist, you know, ability with this kind of like thing and catch this wave. It has always been this thing where, and that's kind of what Ryan and I like made a pact of, where it was like from the beginning with Colors Bloom, we were like, let's make this and validate it purely by what we want to hear, and make it literally the whole make the whole thing like a nice sandwich of everything we love about music in one song. And so that song it's a pop song with like an acoustic painting. And when he first brought it to me, he was like, I kind of want it to be like an Ed Sheeran thing almost, but with my voice. And he's like, and with my guitar, but it builds into kind of like the post-rock kind of explosion that you and me love so much, because that was what our previous bands was like big, like tremolo picking, like, you know, like explosions in the sky, thrice kind of stuff. That was what we were into as young adults. And I think that doing that really is what facilitated the beginning of like Infinite, like that we just put out. Because
so that's what I was gonna say. So all the amalgamation of, I'm going to do like a real quick gloss over of some stuff and then we'll get to Infinite.
Absolutely.
So the amalgamation of you being able to be so invested in the scene also brought some really cool instances of a band called Love being able to be a part of our friends Woe Is Me's comeback show, and like that being a very good instance of you had Young Mountain, which is like a post-rock band. You had Left to Suffer, which is like the heaviest
all very
deathcore
old
you
friends
can imagine.
too. Young Mountain is like a ton, like Jason is like a ton of, and all those dudes are like dudes from like the old days, the old music scene days.
And it's like, and then Woe Is Me, who are obviously big friends of, you know, the band, and so
Hometown
being
heroes,
able to put a band called Love in with them and have this multi-genre show was really cool. Being able to with alongside other big locals like Glimmers and Dim, who I think are changing their name.
Yeah, they're called Future Self now. They're really cool.
Future Self. Yeah. So moving into that and like selling out your first show, being able to play with Harm on some shows with a band called Love, getting a really strong start to the band called Love name, and kind of doing a turn and pulling back some of the music and kind of giving ABCL, I would say, like a fresh start. Or a fresh start, and really you haven't even really like started. This is the defined start.
Right. This is what this is what Ryan and I have been affectionately referring to as phase 1, and everything up to now has been phase 0. So starting kind of from where we were when he brought the songs to me, as we developed the songs in like late 2018 and most of 2019, it was originally going to be him as a solo project, me being his Phineas, like I was saying. It very quickly turned into, we are both the creative forces of this band, and bands are started. And one thing that we figured out at that point in time that we ended up being correct about was we had the intuition that pop solo artists were still cool, and that was a big thing in the 2010s, and it still is now. I would say, I'm not saying it's not, but we knew bands were going to be a cool thing again. We knew bands
you started to see the rise of that with things like the band Camino that we mentioned, or Nightly, or you know, art groups like that.
We could tell that there, besides just one artist with like a bunch of producers like helping them make a cool thing, that, and I have so many of my favorite artists are those type of artists. But we noticed that the wave of things, especially before TikTok really helped blow it up, was that whether it was pop or metal, even if it was just two people with their programs and with their DAWs and making stuff in their room, we noticed that the IP of a band was the thing that kids and that people really latched onto. It's what I latch onto still. When I start naming my favorite artists, the majority of them are groups, like they're bands.
Yeah.
And so we were like, we already are the creative force of this. We can get other members, but at least if it's, let's distill it down to the reality that a lot of bands actually get to, and let's copy Tears for Fears in this respect. Instead of trying to get other members on board at the genesis of this project, why don't we just say a band called Love is at least Ryan Chandler Love and Ian Joshua Riley? And you know, that was kind of like the conversation. And he was like, dude, I'm about this. He's like, there's a lot of Ryan Loves, because we were gonna try to blow him up based on his like name. You know, his name's Ryan Love, and I was like, dude, I'm gonna help you produce this, and we'll market it super well, and you'll be like a pop artist. But then we found out there's like a million Ryan Loves, and I'm an SEO guy, I'm a social media guy. That's what my day job is now, you know. And I was like, we need something better than Ryan Love. It sucks to say, but like there's too many of them. And Ryan Chandler Love doesn't roll off the tongue quite as well. Although it kind of does, because he sounds like a Backstreet Boy with the full name. Yeah. But I don't remember. I still to this day don't remember. I know exactly how the conversation went, but I don't remember who said what. I don't remember if it was me that said the one thing and Ryan with the responses, or vice versa. But the conversation was literally, we were just trying to like figure out a way to incorporate Ryan and his name, like Love, into it, because his last name is literally Love, and we were like, this is not just cool. It's not just like, sad boy, like romantic love. It's like, this was actually like a hallmark of like what we actually like earnestly, genuinely in the way that we love Coldplay. The message at its core, like, is like, not to be cheesy or cornball, but I don't care. I believe in it, is love. Like, we wanted that to be the kind of thing, instead of the music decidedly always being sad or it always being angsty. It has a space for that, but we wanted to create something that was generally more, I don't want to say positive, but like, we wanted to create something that had almost this air of hope to it. That was kind of the vibe. And so since Ryan's last name was Love, we were like, oh, this lends itself super well to that. I don't remember how the conversation went, but we ended up being like, one person said, and then the other person said, and it was, I wish we could just be a band called Love. And the reason that was said was because there's already a band that was called Love from like the 70s. That was like a band, like a folk kind of like early heavy rock band.
Yeah.
And also the SEO of that name would be terrible if we decided to just call ourselves Love. But I think it was me. I don't remember, but I said, I wish we could just be a band called Love. And the reason I think that also could have been Ryan is because I remember the response to that was, dude. And it was like, what? A band called Love? A band called Love? Like 4 words. We're like, okay, a band called Love. What if we did that? And we looked at it and it felt a little like, it was cool, but it felt kind of janky. So we were like, what if we just push it all together and put like a period at the end? Almost like Alexis on Fire, or like an early post-hardcore band would have. Because we were like, even though we come from a world where post-hardcore bands did this, if we do this with this name, it might translate well to pop, which is what people are going to call us anyway.
Yeah.
And sure enough, a band called Love was taken nowhere, except on Bandcamp by this like Brazilian like horror metal band that had one single. Like, when the dude like wears like an elf mask, it's very strange. But his in the band name is like ABC Love, but it's anyway. I'm not trying to plug him, but it wasn't taken anywhere. So we're like, that's the name. A band called. We didn't think too much about it. We didn't want it to be too deep. We didn't want it to be like this thing where we have to explain the band name. So it just became a band called Love, and it was me and him working on everything. We brought Another Life to You. We did like an early version of the programming of like that song to try to make like a more modern style pop song. And then we were like, this is a good blueprint, but I feel like we need to actually add our Ian and Ryan element into this and make it like a band. Then we did that, added your element. We're like, okay, this is a band called Love now. When it was like all the guitars were in there and the bass and the drums, and it didn't sound. What was nice is we added guitars, bass, and drums, and it didn't sound like post-hardcore. You know what I mean?
It didn't sound. Band.
It just sounded like a band with guitars, bass, and drums, and beautiful electronics and keys making this thing for Ryan to sing over. And so, to kind of lead into what you were talking about like Infinite, it was cool because that's what we learned. We built, when I moved into the loft in 2020 and then the pandemic happened, he and I just holed up in there, and it was cool because as a producer, to kind of really, pull this back around to what this podcast is about, I went from working in all these boutique studios, like at Glow in the Dark and at Toast and Jam, where there was all this beautiful equipment. Like Matt had a Sphere console from the 70s, and then he sold that and got like a Yamaha. It was essentially the Yamaha, the Japanese. Yeah, it was essentially a Neve circuitry, but it was the Yamaha brand of it, and it was so nice. I loved that thing. Drums sounded incredible through it. I think he still has it. I can't remember.
It lives in Matt McQueen's studio, I think, now.
In Nashville, or is it in Nashville? Or no, that's Angelica.
Angelica, yeah, it's Angelica.
Yeah. And I still haven't been to that studio. But I worked with all this analog console stuff and like all of these beautiful like outboard gear, like all these beautiful outboard preamps and compressors and stuff at Toast and Jam that you got to work with too, that Matt Wood and Don Maduri owned. And that's what I was used to, was like all of that with Pro Tools and whatnot. And then one day early on in like 2017, 2018, our mutual friend, my old friend Dylan Anderson, he gave me Ableton. And then I got my license from you later too for it. And I really started like dabbling in that and kind of figuring out like what I liked to create in terms of, apart from just recording, I figured out how to just sit down and intuitively create instead of like arming everything, creating my templates, being an engineer. I was like, what if
Yeah.
I just sat down and make stuff like I used to
Being
when I
more
was
of
like a kid, you know?
a producer, like a
Yeah.
producer, like what a modern producer would be.
Right, with like sound and textures
Yeah.
and things like that to create what was just in my head. And that's been the beautiful thing is so far with a band called Love, that's kind of what facilitated us getting any of the songs we have, is that like nothing we create was like us sitting down trying to quote unquote like write in a band called Love song. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
we've never really done that. We just
No.
Ryan and I naturally start creating things in Ableton. You giving me Ableton later when I needed the newer version of it, and us using that a lot in Harm really kind of exposed me, and just also just being around you. I'll credit you with like you kind of showed me, not necessarily, it wasn't that you showed me the things that I didn't know how to do. That there was a lot of that too, but it was like I had all these ideas in my head already. And then you were like, oh yeah, this is just how you do that. If you're looking for this kind of sound, it's this. And I was like, oh, okay, like this is actually simpler than I thought it was. And much like Phineas said in that Tape Notes interview, which I love, because I love Phineas, you love Phineas. I mean, any producer who's in the game right now should be a huge fan of Phineas, even if you don't like his music or Billy's, which I don't know why you wouldn't. But one of the things that resonated with me about him is that Andrew, I'm gonna gas you up for a second. I admire the heck out of you for like doing what you do and like creating beats and stuff like out of like a ukulele where you like do all these crazy like videos and stuff like that. I can do that and I have done that. I don't have the patience to do it most of the time. So I really love how Phineas was in that one episode. He said, I'm a preset guy. Like he's like, I love producers who do all this stuff. He said, I love producers who do basically everything you do. And he was like, I love producers who do all this stuff. It fascinates me. It's incredible. He's like, but so much of like, if I find a sound I like or a thing I like, I'm like, I'm just going to do that. And I'm just going to roll with it. And that's going to be the sound that ends up on the record because I think it sounds cool. And, and for me, getting over the hurdle of needing to kind of create so many individual things at the source, but still getting them to sound good at the source and then just rolling with my idea is literally how we got Infinite, like with the newest single we just released. Because Ryan and I created
it was the first one that was fully tracked and produced by you.
Solely and engineered. Like no,
that's what I mean.
Scott,
that's what I mean.
Exactly. Yeah. Scott mixed it, but this is the first a band called Love song that we've released where it was. I've produced everything so far, but I've had a collaboration of I've had you
Whether
on production too. I had someone engineering. Like it's like me and Dom recorded the first few songs. So for context,
or Lee,
or Leave for When You See the Light. Yeah, we've released Colors Bloom, and we had a few other songs. We had some out with that. We had a song called Another Life, No Ransom, When You See the Light. Those are currently not on streaming services anymore. Those will be on an EP that are coming out later. So this is the only place I will say that publicly. But what was cool is for the first batch of songs, I was producing the songs the same way I produced other bands, which was just at Toast and Jam with all the outboard gear we had and with Dom helping me out. And, you know, I was just miking up amps the way I do. And we got the drums sounding good with Dom's help. Bowman was actually there for like one of the first days we did Colors Bloom for the drums. And it was cool because it was like I got to produce the thing and decide how everything sounds. And then I called you to throw paint at the wall with programming. And then so like I always got to produce the stuff. And then with When You See the Light, Ryan and I went to Lee Rouse. That was the only thing besides Infinite that you weren't a part of, basically, where it was just me and Ryan essentially telling Lee, this is what we want, and and he will perform all of it, but this is how we want it to sound. And he would just, you know, do his thing in Cubase.
He's just an excellent engineer.
He's a wizard. Yeah. He's an amazing facilitator. He's like you. He's an amazing facilitator of exactly what the artist is telling him. And if they don't know what they want, he's great at creating that for them.
Yeah.
But me and Ryan knew exactly what we wanted with that song, just like straight piano rock song, not too many synth layers or anything. We just wanted to sound exactly the way it did. But up to that point, with just the handful of singles we've released over a span of like a year and a half, where we've only played 7 shows being a new band. So what we affectionately refer to as phase 0 of the band, like the Genesis. Yeah. During all that time, Ryan and I took a step away from Toast and Jam, especially after the Dowboys record was done. And we, because, you know, they were closing down that location and Dom was building the new Toast and Jam at his house that he owns now. So I wasn't going to be able to be there as much anymore because it's literally in his house, you know, closer to Atlanta anyway. And, I was like, okay, well, we're gonna have to be self-sufficient anyway if we want to make recordings and demo and stuff like that. Oh, so one of the things that's gonna be cool. I'm gonna bring my daughter up because she's right here with me right now, and I think she's being a little
That's fine.
bashful. So this is my daughter CJ. One of the things that was crazy about it was I went from having all this outboard gear and analog stuff and expensive studios that my friends just let me work in, basically. And I had to kind of reset and like dial it back to just what I have is what I have. And so Ryan and I put our money together, and with our friend Jason Mays from Young Mountain, with his help, because he was just the homie, we were able to get a Universal Audio Apollo X4. We splurged and got the X4. And we were just like, this is what everyone uses. It's a dope interface with amazing pre's. It's going to be awesome. This is what we need, at least just to get our ideas on paper. We can commit some of our vocals and stuff that we record to this. And we just had these HS5s that I got from my friend Kenny from The Masquerade, who's an amazing sound guy and producer on his own right. He works on a lot of cool artists. And what was crazy was that I didn't realize just how quality of a product I could create with just what was in my room, which was literally just how I started with all of this. You know what I mean? I didn't realize what I could do to commit real vocals that I recorded in a basement with just this mic, and that would be good enough. And not just because we deem that it's good enough. Learning how to kind of reset and figure out that so many of my favorite artists do things exactly this way. I watched how Chris Martin and Coldplay made Ghost Stories, and because he was, in the really hard place that he was in at that time, a lot of it was they didn't even go into studios. A lot, other than the one song that they did with Avicii, A Sky Full of Stars. I think that's where they went to a studio. But so much of it they just made at home. You know what I mean? They just literally like set up what they could.
And there's a reason that album is so simplistic, but also very lyric driven.
Exactly. It's so sparse, and the production on each track is so unique and beautiful, but it's like it's equally as minimal as it is huge with just what they used. And that was kind of the thing, was like between that and like all of my influences from like Radiohead to like electronic music to garage music and house, and then like ambient and post-rock music. I love Sigur Rós, I love Brian Eno. I love all these different things where all these textures kind of come from. And then I love bands that use that in a cool way. Like I love, Coldplay. I love Angels and Airwaves, which a lot of people have compared Infinite to Angels and Airwaves, or to even like later era Blink because of that. And I love Blink-182. The coolest thing about it is that scaling back and building our little loft studio with just, again, some HS5s, and Apollo, some MIDI controllers, this microphone, and then just a MacBook and a bunch of plugins that I just spend money on as I, just made more money, and like was like, I could just, instead of buying instruments, I could just buy VSTs,
Yeah.
And a lot of the best ones that I ended up using, I say that about the money thing to say that a lot of the best VSTs I ended up getting were actually the free ones that you showed me, Labs, for instance, honestly, Spitfire ended up being all over that plugin ended up being all over the EP that we're about to drop this year. You know what I mean? And it's so fantastic because it's so versatile. But so after recording all these handful of singles that we did produce ourselves, but with the help of engineers and with you and with our homies who would just basically like facilitate our ideas, we just started making stuff ourselves, and kind of in the spirit of what Ryan was doing, where he, he bought a MacBook in 2020, bought Logic Pro, and started teaching himself production to the point that he can literally produce up all his own ideas, and he doesn't need me to facilitate as much anymore, which is awesome. Shows how much,
which makes it more collaborative as well. If you feel like, if you can get a clearer idea of what he's trying to go for.
Dude, it's like Tim McTighe from Under Oath said it best, and this segues hugely into Infinite. He said, you can have like a boutique studio with awesome gear, and all that stuff is super valid because it's made records like the way we love for up to now, basically, and it's proven. You can have all of that, but if you don't have vision, like if you don't hear in your head the thing you're trying to create, and if you don't know what it is, like it doesn't matter. And he's like, dude, kids have literally, and Steve Lacy is a perfect example of this with, I think it was the track Pride by Kendrick Lamar. Tim McTagg said, kids these days can literally, he's like, and I mean this, they can create a quality product now with an iRig and their phone and GarageBand in the phone and make like a beat with like a cool guitar, like, you know, and through going through an amp sim on GarageBand. And then they just have to use an SM7B and record some sick vocals, and they drop it on SoundCloud, and it's awesome. And people love it. And they actually are genuinely fans of it. So instead of and like he was just using that as an example, and I had just before that read about Steve Lacy doing that with Pride by Kendrick Lamar. That was literally made on a phone. You know what I mean? It's incredible. Like the beat.
Yeah.
And so so to me, I basically had to kind of like, it didn't take too long to do because it had been gradually deconstructing this over time through everything we've talked about. But I had to kind of undo this idea in my head that with boutique studio recording, that it had to be not the best. I still needed it to be quality. I needed to be the best version of what the performance could be. But it didn't need to be all these different kinds of specific analog sources or anything like that.
Yeah.
That if I just sat down at my computer and started demoing my idea, the demo itself could turn into a quality product with just the right amount of attention and whatnot. So one day, just to test out the Apollo, once we got it, and I set it up in the loft and everything, I just wanted to show Ryan the processing power of what it can do, because, you know, a lot of the processing happens on that interface so that on top of it being so good, it's bearing a lot of the CPU workload that the Mac would otherwise be doing. So I was just trying to show him how cool it was and then what the sound was like. And so I sat down on my computer, and I did this with several other songs that ended up becoming songs that are going to become ABCL songs. But I just jammed this riff, and I was just so happy. I was just in such a genuinely like fulfilled place where I had my own little mini stripped down minimalist studio based on like kind of like Phineas's setup or your setup, where it was like, this is just enough. This is what I need. And I was just so in such a good creative headspace. This was like January 2021. So this was almost 2 years ago, or it was over 2 years ago. And maybe it was March. It was like 2 years ago. So a year into us making a band called Love Music, but right before us playing the first show, I just riffed with my jazz master that was, I think, kind of out of tune too. I just riffed the and I just did that through Tone Hub, added some delay, and I was like, ooh, I can make the delay kind of sound buttery and almost like a synth instead of like making it sound like a guitar with delay like I like. I made it almost sound kind of like the way I tweaked it with barely anything. It was just that, and I think I added Valhalla Supermassive to it. I think all that ended up happening was I was like, I want to make it sound almost more like an Owl City kind of electronic, as opposed to just a guitar lead where it does the you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I added the bass part with bass chords the way I do, just boneheaded, like just the A, B, C, and then D progression. And I sent it to Ryan I just programmed the most basic drums with room sound. And I was like, dude, check out what our setup can do. You know what I mean? That was all the idea was. It was like 8 bars. And I sent it to him in a video. And he was like, that's incredible. What is that idea you just made? You know, and I was like, oh, it's nothing. It was like a throwaway thing. You know, that like I just riffed right now to show you what the computer can do. And he was like, you need to turn that into something, man. And I was like, yeah, okay, I will. And I just kept rolling with it. And Kelsey was there with me. She was literally on our PC, which I'm talking to you on right now. This is back in the loft. And she was playing like Stardew Valley or something. And she was just on her headphones. And the whole time I just got absorbed. And I swear in 45 minutes, I cranked out the whole song structure, like everything. Like it's like and like just all the way through the bridge. I did the little bass part. I like picked up literally the bass that's right behind me, my P bass, and I just added the boom 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 boom, and it was exactly what came out at the time. And I was like, this song has identity. I don't need to try to contrive what the identity of this is. I just need to feel this and let it completely out. And so one of the things I did that kind of was like the preset conversation from Phineas earlier, I took I love the what's it called, the Plugin Alliance audio. It's the what is it called? It's called the Lion Synth. I forget like what the make of it is, but it's like this amazing like plugin that's basically like it emulates like a modular synth, and it has all these different presets, and there's this one arpeggiated synth in it that's called Probability Signs, and I literally always use it because it matches the tempo of like whatever your tempo in the session is, and so you can just hold down one note on your MIDI controller, and then it'll just go like infinite's at 150 BPM. So I held down A, which is the root note of the song and the key of the song. And so it just did this beautiful like it was just all the way through it, which I did in Thriving Season and everything like that. And I was like,
it's the unfiltered audio Lion.
Unfiltered audio. That's it. The unfiltered audio Lion synth. Yeah, I love that thing. I use that Probability Signs preset on so much now, and it's become my signature because it's like when you want that extra pop of like this urgency, and it's like 16ths that aren't coming from a percussive element, it's coming from a melody. Like it just adds that much more. So I sent it just boneheadedly. I sent it through the whole song. So not only did I riff and do the bass and drums out in 45 minutes for the whole song, I added that oscillating, arpeggiating synth through the entire song. Then I added, using labs, I added a high octave of A and a low octave of A of the choir. So it's like, like the whole time going along that. And then I, with Arcade, I used the acoustic flutter, and I had it alternate between A and D. So while the progression is A, and the verse is A, D, 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 E, you know what I mean? It's doing boom, bam, boom, badum, boom, bam, boom, bam, and it's like this little beautiful, like pretty, like harmonic thing that's happening. Yeah. And those layers of things, and then like one sub bass that I added, taking notes from you with We Did No Ransom. Yeah. With I used the Vital synth. I put all that in there, and I was like, now it's our band. I didn't think about it. I didn't do too much to it. I was just like, this is, in my mind, I was like, this is at least the demo. But I've done everything I can in 45 minutes, and this is a whole finished song. Yeah. And by the end of it, I sent it to Ryan. I was like, what do you think of this? And he was like, dude, this is it. You know, like, this is literally like, I was like, yeah, I know, we might need to tweak some things. And we spent like the last like year and a half on and off with all these ideas we've been working on as we've released songs, as we've played a couple shows, tweaking this song. And every time we tweaked it, we're like, nah, the first version's better. The first, like, literally, like, and so when I say that, literally with all the synth and programming that went into it, which was, again, like 6 tracks, and then the very minimal guitar that's in it, because there's like one kind of rhythm guitar track that I buried. Then there's mainly lead and then bass. Other than one punch in that Ryan heard that he made me do on the slide up in the bridge, that song is all original takes. Like, it's the take from like the Alpha 1.1 version of the demo that I made. And it was just, it was enough. And it wasn't just enough. It was like, it wasn't like compromising or settling. It was like, this thing has so much identity that to try to replicate it now would kind of cheapen what it is. So we took it to Ryan's basement, set up the studio in there, and in like a day, we wrote and recorded those lyrics and vocals. And the lyrics kind of came from like a really cool place for us too, because for me it was like being out in Iowa in the middle of 2021, and we're visiting Kelsey's family while she was pregnant. We had gotten married the year before that. She was pregnant with our daughter, and I was like looking up at the stars where there's like literally no lights, and it literally like made me feel like, I mean, a way that I've only felt really when I'm on stage. Like, I teared up, like just at the wonder of like seeing, just literally like staring into literal infinity. You know what I mean? And seeing everything, like the whole galaxy. And then coming back, and Ryan and I were just talking about how like, man, we would really rather be doing anything that makes us feel that way than half of the stuff we have to do. Like, you know, I mean, we're fortunate enough that like for our work and our jobs, we get to do creative things for a living. But like so much of the time, we'd rather just be doing whatever makes us feel that all the time. So we merged as a songwriter. I wrote that chorus from just the feeling of seeing the stars. And then we brought those two ideas together of like him just feeling like it's a little too easy to fall in and out of line, but it's way too hard to wait your turn, and how that juxtaposed with the first verse. And we didn't even have to try. And one day we laid down that song on vocals in his basement with the 7B, and we were just like, that's the take. Like, it's like literally, it was just so beautiful and perfect. And before we even put out the song at show 1, that was the opener. We did Love, the intro, and Infinite was the first song. Like, that was like this is our first song of our set. This is our calling card song,
Yeah.
And so we sat on it for a little while. We had our mutual friend Scott Siegel, incredible mix and mastering engineer. He worked on the new Woe Is Me. He mixed and mastered the new Harm. He is just an amazing facilitator of all genres of music, an amazing guitarist, composer, songwriter, and just like a god tier mixer and master. He just works in his bedroom just like all of us. And he took this song from like demo, which was essentially just a thing I had made in a room, to this beautiful, like, full-fledged idea. But it's crazy because at the end of the day, all I did was really, hand him the stems and made sure they were cleaned up and nice. But they were just the original takes. They weren't anything more than just, it's basically, it was me validating myself as a producer to myself, saying, this is good enough. And it's not just good enough. This is actually the song. You know what I mean? And I'm sure you've had moments like that too, where it's 100%. Like where you've had to like kind of tell yourself, like, after all the tweaking and editing and whatnot, that this is that thing, like, this is good enough. And but I mean, I think you were doing the recording in your home studio thing long before I was, so I was kind of late to that game. But
no, I 100%. I think what's cool, I mean, we played that song. I've played that song with you a bunch of times at this point.
Yep.
But hearing it in its final form is, I don't know, it's kind of amalgamation. I really like that that's the song that, if we're talking about like moving from phase 0 to like phase really 1, the start, the start of the life of the band.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a really
EP
good
era,
I feel like that's a really good one to start with. Well, obviously you want to have Colors Bloom, I believe, is the one that you left up.
It'll be on the EP too.
But that is kind of like the start of phase 0.
Yeah,
I would
that's like
say.
the birth of the band during the pandemic kind of thing.
Yeah, that very much came out of that time of everybody being collaborative and you two just trying to figure out what this thing is. And I feel like Infinite is a more like, all right, here's what the thing is. And
here's what it is, so naturally, without us trying to create what that is. It's just let's let the song, now that we don't have to be in a room at our old studio with all these people helping to facilitate the idea. Here's a funny example of what I'm talking about. I don't know if you know about this, but when we were first recording Colors Bloom, Ryan and I had hammered out the structure so strongly as a rhythm section. Like, we'd actually rehearsed it in the practice space with me on bass and him on drums, exactly as you hear it on the recording. So Bowman and Dom got so frustrated with us about this, but when we did Colors Bloom, we did not record a scratch track. We literally just said roll ice, and this was more me than Ryan, but I was like, just roll it. We've got it. So I went out into the room with him and just directed him, because he knew he made the structure. Like, it was his structure. And so we did that. And then I laid down bass and they were like, why can't we hear it? And I'm like, there's no point. It's going to help. It's going to make more sense if he just does the structure exactly as he knows it. So the drums on Colors Bloom, he did to a click with no track at all. He just from memory. That's how good he is of a songwriter. And then I laid down the bass and then we did everything else. But all that to say, it's nice. What was interesting about Infinite is exactly what you're saying, but really highlighting the fact that, like, instead of having to be in a room with all our collaborators helping us to facilitate this and kind of having to deal with our idiosyncrasies and my neurotic means of production and the way I think, this was literally allowing that same creative process to spill out of me into Ableton and just trust that this was good enough, that the presets, that like the tone that I committed and everything, with some minor tweaks here and there, of course, but ultimately all the stuff I did months later after the fact, trying to make it like perfect, you don't always have to do that. If the song has identity and it's telling you what it is, let it tell you. You know what I mean? Truly.
Yeah, 100%.
If the song has identity and it's telling you what it is, let it tell you.
You can always refine later.
Yes, exactly. And then the beautiful thing about that is so many of those kind of songs, when you have like a strong song there with a strong chorus and hook and exactly what the idea is about, people will know. And not only that, that lends itself to so many different versions of that song existing, or people like creating their own covers of it, or Ryan doing an acoustic version of it right now. We could make we can make a country version of that song, you know?
For sure.
And
just put a little swing in it.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the coolest things that we've noticed is that we don't have to get into this, but like you and I were talking about this past weekend. But you know, we've done some targeted ads and stuff for it just to kind of like build the audience organically of a band called Love in other countries and the U.S. instead of just, you know, doing the conventional thing of playing local shows to build a local following, because we started to do that with the few shows we've played, but and then the Southeast ones we've done in the Carolinas. But realistically, we're like, let's see if we can reach people on the internet. And somehow in the last week, since this song came out, we've not only doubled our following, but like so many people, especially a lot of people from Sao Paulo, Brazil, because Coldplay is massive there, so I guess they like us by association, have messaged us, and they've said things. Even this one magazine editor from Australia said the same thing, and I just emailed her back this morning. But the common thing I get about this song is not just, I love this song, it's beautiful, like this song is amazing, I needed to hear this, is one of the big ones, I need to hear this. So many people say like, the message of the song is so clear and the music fits the message. Like, this is exactly what I wanted, you know what I mean? And I just let that spill out. I didn't say, I'm going to write a Coldplay song, I'm going to write an Angels and Airwaves like kind of crossover thing. It was just what was the natural amalgamation of everything that I have done musically up to now as a producer. And I feel like that song,
it's also a testament to you and Ryan being very in sync on what it needs to be, and you having a very similar how clear your vision of what ABCL is, because he wasn't there in that moment whenever you tracked all that stuff. He wasn't there to have that initial discussion with you or feel those feelings, or even when he wasn't with you in Iowa when you tracked or when you thought about that chorus. But he wrote everything else around it, and it all makes total sense.
Total sense. Yeah. And I think that that's the thing, is like, if we're talking about production and songwriting, it's like, not only do you need to focus on what the identity is, you need to have that clear vision of what the identity is before going into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or even just let it come together as it's happening. Let it tell you what it is. Like I keep saying, not to sound pretentious or like too like artsy. I'm being pretty literal with it, because a lot of times the thing will just be there. But if it's not there, don't try to force it. I find that you know, a band called Love exists in that weird gap of like between pop and alternative, and both of those worlds really try to, with all the different production tricks and all the different things, and the, you know, the nuances of what makes the sound of the zeitgeist, you know what I mean? It always tries to tell you, this is what's cool now, this is the thing. And it's like, if you like those sounds or particular ones and you want to mesh with other things, that's fine. I'm never gonna ever say, oh yeah, that sound isn't what's cool, or this is what's cool. But there's so many gurus who talk about, this is the right way to do things and this is the wrong way to do things if you're making this type of song. And I think that if there is a right or wrong way at all, it's more about, does this song actually like speak to you, like truly? Does it's like even if it's not like the most authentic thing you've written, which I don't know how to really do that. I can contrive a song in my head. I could like write like a bogus pop song for days just for fun if I wanted to, or a bogus like active rock song, or a bogus CCM song. But like, because that's fun to do sometimes just as an exercise. But like, for the most part, if it's just like another quote unquote like another breakup song, or like this kind of like feeling low type beat kind of thing, like it's like that stuff is cool. But if it's not a clear vision other than just, I want to write a sad song about X, Y, and Z, and then do all these things that the zeitgeist tells me is popular with those things, then it's not really going to be as satisfying for you, let alone for other people who are listening to it, if you're trying to get people to listen to it. So I think like in saying that, I'm not trying to tell people, hey, don't make this kind of music if that's exactly what you want to make. But like, if you're a producer and you're a songwriter, I'm an amateur. I always tell people I'm still improvising my way through this whole thing. I don't know what the hell I'm doing half the time. And I think that's how we all feel. But like, I'm not trying to tell anyone what to do, but I would advise just create something cool with identity and with all the things that made you from the beginning. Like all the things that you loved about music from point A all the way to point B where you're writing something. Just let that spill out and then just try to like build around that. And if like what you said about Ryan, like, and I both being on the same page, if you're a producer and you're working with an artist, I found that where I was super boneheaded before, and I was like, I want to make the art, and my genuine goal was I want to make the artist's vision come to life. But at the end of the day, I'm right. All that kind of led me to doing was like, that kind of led me to be the kind of person and producer who was like, we're not on this. I didn't know it, but we weren't 100% on the same page about what the vision was. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I thought
you
I
had
understood
your vision
it.
and they had theirs.
Yes, exactly. And I learned that the hard way, man. Like I learned that like later than I probably should have as in my late 20s working with artists. But
that's just part of experience though, in doing a lot of records and honestly being told. It's kind of hard to learn that yourself without, being instructed by somebody else of, hey, maybe you need to like not do that.
Yeah. Or hey, maybe like this is your idea of what we are, but that's not what we actually want to be. And luckily enough, like I don't think I ever took it that far with artists where it was like I was trying to turn them into something they weren't, because I'd experienced that with other producers and I knew I didn't want to be that way. But at the same time, even if it was like 98.5% that we were on the same page, 1% of anything is a lot, is something I always say.
Yeah.
So for 1.5% of me not understanding whatever the vision was and me bullheadedly trying to dig my heels into that's always going to be like the hinge point of where you have to kind of say, like, let your pride go and be like, I need to like listen to what the song is and what the artist is telling me it is.
Yeah.
But when you and your artist are completely on the same page about the vision, and more importantly that the vision is that strong, I think.
Yeah.
Because this thing is like a weak vision will make it so that people are arguing, trying to get there. I've been in those writers' rooms before where it's like no one really knows what the song is yet. We have a vague idea and we're trying to work around it.
And everybody's arguing for their version of the song.
Yeah, exactly. Like everyone wants
exist.
to make like exactly. Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. So that speaks more into apart from just the pride element or people not being on the same page. What you said is so true. Where you were saying, like me and Ryan having such a clear idea what the vision is. That's just because from the beginning it was clear and we've only made it more and more refined. Yeah. So it's like if the vision for not only the project but the specific song is already strong, then that helps keep everyone aligned to like what it is. You'll know what does or doesn't work. And half the time you can try any idea, even something crazy outlandish on something, and if it really doesn't work, you'll feel it. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Yeah.
Dude, so we're last little segment as we're landing the plane.
Absolutely.
Because you are so involved in the Atlanta scene and like the underground scene, and obviously everyone needs to go listen to a band called Love, all one word, the new single Infinite. I want you to shout out because you have a lot, bands that people that you think are underrated.
That I think are underrated. Okay.
Yeah, that's
a lot.
Yeah, I know. two underground bands that you think are underrated that people don't know about.
Okay, I'm going to shout out one from here who are old. I'm going to be diverse with this. I'm going to shout out one from here that I mentioned briefly, and then I'm going to shout out another one that I just discovered but have just become friends with. So I like a lot of different stuff. And that's kind of what's shaped the sound of both the music I made with other people and the music I made myself. You know this about me. You know how diverse like my influence is. I just love music.
Yeah.
Genres completely. I could split hairs on genres all day. And I love doing it. I love being that nerdy archivist guy about genres, but at the end of the day I could care less about genres. Like I don't it's so surface level.
Music is music and it's fun.
Music is just awesome and it's great. And it's the best. It's why we're talking on this podcast at all right now. A band that speaks to me in terms of the way, one, they're old friends. You had the pleasure of mixing them. And mixing what I produced specifically of theirs, because they've self-produced a lot since then, which is super cool because they've kind of they're going the same route we are with a lot of this. They were called Hindsight, not the hardcore band from Australia. That's why they changed their name. They're called Tier Blue now, TIER Blue, and they're from Macon, Georgia. I just went to their album release show a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, which was also, it wasn't just their album release show. It was their first show as Tier Blue in their hometown.
Yeah.
And when I'm telling you, dude, that even if those guys weren't my friends, if I knew that band, I would have paid to go and see just that
100%.
tour with just that package. That package was just Fury and Few opening for them. Incredible band as well.
Yeah.
But Tier Blue is the most beautiful mix. They played my wedding. They're just, some of my oldest friends. The first single that was ever on the radio that I produced was their single "Can't Complain" when they were called Hindsight. And then I've had the pleasure of producing a handful of singles since then, which you mixed. And then the song
one of my favorite mixes I've ever done was At Home.
Yeah.
That
At
song,
Home is one of my favorite songs of all time. Yeah,
it's so good.
And see you, the version that I did that you mixed is the final track on their album that was completely self-produced other than that one song. And they're basically like, I would say they're like almost a sister band to a band called Love in a lot of ways now, because their frontman Caleb is one of the most amazingly talented songwriters I've ever met in my life. Just everything from singer to guitarist to
how does that man's
drummer.
Voice sound so
I
good?
know.
It's frustrating.
He's drums on like half of their recordings too. He's like one of the best drummers I've ever met. He and Ryan are both drummers who are the best singer-songwriters you've ever met, and they have the star power.
Yeah,
they have the star power.
They really do.
You're like, you look at both of them, and regardless of the band they're in, you're like, how are you not famous? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you just want to be anywhere around them. But Brent McKinney is one of my best friends in the world. He's their bass player, and he's the me of their band. Just like the facilitator who helps make the band what it is. Jake, their guitar player, Hunter, their drummer, good old friends of mine. Their keyboardist, Ethan's amazing. They're the most beautiful cross between old school R&B to indie rock like Manchester Orchestra to straight up rock and roll to like rock and roll in the vein of like bluesy, like southern, but then like heavy rock.
Yeah.
And man, that band truly, even Radiohead, even kind of like strokesy kind of stuff, like I don't know how to put it other than Tier Blue is just truly a band's band, and they cover all the bases genre wise, and they are going to be like, if you like Ed Sheeran, you'll love them. If you like Radiohead, you will love them.
I think that we should take some time, a little time so we can talk. I know that you got you some things that's on your mind, and judging by your face, it must be an awful lot. Yes, I remember, I know I can be a dick. I said that I love you, you're still the one to be.
That's kind of the best way I can describe it.
They are distilled to me. They are every kind of rock band that you could ever want to be in a band.
Distilled, yeah. It's like if it's like if a band called Love is like, we are a pop band, but we're just like a band, and we do like kind of like all the genres, and they're a band and they do all the genres. We are definitely we're like two peas in a pod. We are the pop one. They are the rock one. Truly.
Yeah.
But we do all of the same textures and things. It's like we're not one's not necessarily more heavy than the actually I'd say they're heavier than us. But they're amazing. Sure. They are truly one of the greatest bands in the world. They're underrated. Their album, they just released an album called Relearning Old Tricks. It is one of my favorite records of this year. Go listen to it. I'd say they're completely underrated, but not for long. They will take over the world. And I intend to do an arena tour with them one day.
They're incredible. I agree. Good shout.
And then the other one is one that I don't know. I only recently became friends with them through Instagram. But my friend Ian Sushiura, who he's a producer, he's the project Hyper Potions. I'm not shouting him out. I do love him, but I'm just saying
Hyper Potions is dope. But yeah,
they're incredible. He did a music for Sonic video games and everything. He has a bunch of awesome original music. He's incredible. He got on Discord with me a few weeks back, and he was like, "Dude, so the algorithm for Spotify like blessed me super hard today." I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Dude, I need you to check this out." He's like, "There's this band that I discovered that's like this local band from New York. They had like 300 monthly listeners at the time. Now they have like 2,000, so that'll tell you that they're kind of starting to pick up steam." He's like, "They're a local band from New York. called he's like, I don't know how to pronounce it. It looks like the word pho, like the food, but it's P.H.0. And I found out that 0 is pronounced Ling, because Ling is the Cambodian word for 0, I think. So it's PH Ling is the band name. PH Ling. But it's written like P.H.0. And he's like, they're a local band from New York that they're all the members are East Asian, and they're based out of Chinatown, and they all go to college like in New York, and they identify as like they're an all East Asian cyber metal cyberpunk collective. And I was like, what? And so then I listened to it, and I'm not joking. I listened to I'm so glad I get to tell you about this on this, because I know I haven't shown you this yet. Yeah. When I tell you that I listened to the first track on their EP, they just released an EP. And I need to get the name of it right. It is, I've been listening to it. So it's Karma. Karma's the name of the EP. I don't know why I forgot that. I listened to the first track on it on Discord with Ian, and it was called, it's called Vanity. When I tell you that my reaction was so genuine, I literally took my AirPods out while I was on Discord with him, and I was like, Ian, this is changing my life right now. It is like, I mean, in the first song alone, they go from like the most, first of all, they have 2 guitarists and a drummer. Then they have a girl who plays the erhu, like that one-stringed like Chinese instrument. That's like she's amazing. She shreds on it. And then they have a guy who's their producer. They have a guy who's their producer, but he just does like modular synth stuff live, like the whole time, like moving. I mean, and they're like 20. I think they're like in their early 20s, and they're so young. And when I tell you that in one song, they went from, I mean, groove metal like Meshuggah to like Skrillex to like, I mean, like this beautiful, like almost like this like video game like background music with like the erhu, where it just sounded like post rock, like building on the 4 to the 5 to the 6. You know what I mean? Yeah. But like it just sounded like your soul was like leaving your body, all the way to like D&B. Like, I mean, like straight drum and bass. Like this band, I listened to this whole EP, and I texted Ian, and I was like, this band is music too. Like this is literally like this is the evolution of music. What I also can't stress enough about this band is that they are proof to me. They're mostly instrumental. They have vocal features that are incredible. I heard this band and it made me so happy, because what it told me was music is still being innovative. Like young musicians are still innovating. Every time I think everything that's been done has been done, I am thankfully proven wrong. Yeah. And this is proof of that. I literally hit them up on Instagram, and I just told them, y'all are amazing. If you ever need a show in Atlanta, please let me book you. So they said that, and one of their members apparently loved visiting Atlanta when they did. So I'm setting something up for them in August, I think. I hope. So, but go listen to Karma by PH Ling.
Reminds me of like the way you're describing it reminds me of like how you talk about Sigur Rós in a similar way.
Yeah.
But if you took the members of Inner Shikari and you put it in Sigur Rós.
If you took the members of Inner Shikari and then had and then also added like one guitarist who is definitely more groove leaning and one guitarist who clearly came from a post rock band, because they literally said that like the other guitarist they added was like from a post rock band.
So there's a Sigur Rós, yeah.
Dude, I'm telling you, PH Ling is the future, and in such a way that when they become mass spread, I'm calling this now, and I'm glad we're recording this because you and I love to make grand sweeping things like this.
Oh yeah.
Bring Me the Horizon is going to take this band on tour. I'm serious. They're going to get that popular. they're gonna get that popular where people are gonna try to rip them off, where like they want like a groove metal song, then beautiful like film score thing, and in the same song it turns into with like almost like side chained to hell and back electronic music, then back into a breakdown.
I could see Sleep Token taking them out.
Oh, absolutely.
For real.
Absolutely.
Like that feels like something that would fit in that, like, or honestly, if you want to get really weird, like if Breakins gets to that level of like being able to do like big theaters, like I could totally see.
I agree with you purely because I'm so glad you said Breakins, because Breakins and his tendencies of what he does with blending genre effortlessly is the only to the same comparison. Is to the same degree as it's like, yeah, Breakins and PH Ling sound nothing alike, but PH Ling blends the genres that they love so effortlessly the way Breakins does, as like a 5-piece band of like literally college students. So yeah, Karma by PH Ling, please check it out. It's p.h.0. They're on Instagram and they're hilarious. They're called PH. It's on Instagram. It's PH0 Cyberpunk is their handle. Okay. And they're one of my new favorite bands
on Apple Music. So it was good. Yeah, no, fun.
They are one of the best bands I've ever heard. Since Ryan and I saw Ed Sheeran 2 weeks ago, my literal gym playlist has been so bizarre. I tweeted about this the other day where I was like, I think I'm the only person in this gym whose like workout playlist is Ed Sheeran and this like East Asian cyber metal band.
And also, it's incredible. And also the Kingdom Hearts soundtrack.
And also, yeah, honestly, with them, it might as well be like I'll show you the part specifically, but yeah. Tier Blue and PH0 or PH Ling.
PH Lang. All right. Yeah. So Ling, PH Ling. All right. So on that note, Ian, thanks so much for coming and hanging out.
Dude, thank you for having me.
Yeah,
it's seriously so fun. This is like one of our normal conversations.
This is just a recorded version of a phone call. Check out A Band Called Love at A Band Called Love on Instagram, and that's probably the main place you try to drive people.
Yeah. We are on TikTok and Twitter at A Band Called Love. If you want to follow us there, we are going to be posting there a little bit more now. And can I plug the EP? Is this okay to do that the first time?
Yeah, that's fine. I was gonna say before you even do that, if you want to follow Ian is at Ian Joshua Riley on Instagram, and that's probably there on Twitter where you're most active.
Yeah, I would say that and Twitter, and if you're on anything, I'm at Ian Joshua Riley on literally everything.
Yeah, but you're mainly active on Instagram and Twitter. But yeah, go plug away.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a debut EP coming out soon. We'll be announcing that soon. So I'm doing kind of a soft announcement with no title here. And that'll be toward the end of this summer. We've been self-producing it with the help of our friend Corey Batista and with Andrew. And it's the first of 2 EPs we're going to be doing. So if you're hearing this for the first time, we've literally just started building an audience and seeing what this looks like with our new single. So if you want to get on the ground floor, now is the time to do it, because we're having a lot of fun, like kind of interacting with everyone and showing people what we're working on right now, because we're trying to make this thing and this weird project we call A Band Called Love the most interactive thing we can with our audience. We're not a very traditional band, so we're trying to kind of make it fun for the people who are paying attention to be rewarded with what they see and with what they stick around for. So
and there's also been conversations of us doing other things, like whether it's Discord stuff or other podcast stuff, or I don't know, collaborations with other people. I don't know, whatever it needs to look like. But
there's a lot in the pipeline for sure.
The span, the scope of it is very, very wide, and it's more of like, I mean, me being involved a little bit is it's going to be, we're going to try as many things as possible to let the people who enjoy the music have a good time with it. And be able to 100%. Interact with the people involved, whether it's me, you, Ryan, Corey, whoever, it can be involved in whatever it needs to be. It's going to be fun. And I'm excited about it.
And for the content that we have, like the music and everything, we just want it to be like, if you catch one thing and you really like it, it's coming back and you'll hear it again at some point. Like, it's like, if just, I really enjoy the band from the UK, Static Dress, because their frontman creative director Ollie, he loves to leave Easter eggs in things for people who pay attention. So I've really had a lot of fun taking that and leaving it for people, and it's rewarded some people. I've had some people from even Brazil be like, "Oh, this is that from that other song," like, and I'm like, "Yeah, I know, just keep watching every video. Everything's there, all the stuff's there." So yeah, go follow us on social media. We're at A Band Called Love on everything.
Very fun. Ian, thanks so much for hanging out.
Dude, thanks so much for having me.
Of course, listeners, thank you so much for hanging out with us today, and we will see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.